Listen, I want to tell you
Yeah,
something.
I'm here.
What you're about to hear will make you stop whatever you are doing.
What's going on?
Because this is the kind of story people don't forget. The kind that starts soft and then hits hard. And it all began on a day when everything was normal, until one small thing changed, and nothing was normal again. The phone rang at about 2:47 in the morning. Nobody calls at 2:47 in the morning with good news. Jake Harmon was lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling like he did most nights. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. It hadn't for years. The fan spun above him, slow and creaky, and the streetlight outside his window painted orange lines across the wall. When the phone buzzed on the nightstand, he didn't jump. He just turned his head and looked at it. The name on the screen made his chest tighten. Tommy Reeves. He hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Jake sat up slowly, his heart beating a little faster now. He picked up the phone and stared at the screen. The call went to voicemail. A few seconds later, a text came through. "Jake, it's Tommy. Call me back. It's about Brian." Brian. That name hit him like a fist to the stomach. Brian Calloway. Jake put the phone down and rubbed his face with both hands. His palms were rough and calloused from years of working with motorcycles. He could still smell oil on his fingers even though he'd washed them twice before bed. He didn't want to call Tommy back. He didn't want to hear whatever news was coming. But he picked up the phone anyway. Tommy answered on the first ring. "Jake? Yeah, it's me." Tommy's voice sounded older, tired, like he hadn't slept in days. "I wasn't sure if you'd call back," Tommy said. "What's this about?" Jake asked. His voice was flat. There was a long pause. Jake could hear Tommy breathing on the other end. "Brian's dead, man." Jake didn't say anything. "He died 2 days ago, heart attack. They found him in his kitchen. He was only 33. Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His mouth felt dry. "Jake, you still there?" "Yeah. The funeral's on Saturday in Millbrook. I thought you should know." "Why?" Jake asked. "What do you mean, why? Why would I need to know?" Tommy went quiet again. Then he said, "I don't know, man. I just thought, I don't know. Maybe you'd want closure or something." Closure. Jake almost laughed, but it came out like a cough. "Thanks for telling me," Jake said. "Take care, Tommy." He hung up before Tommy could say anything else. Jake sat there in the dark, holding the phone in his hand. His heart was pounding now. Not from fear, not from sadness, from something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. No, not anger. Something under the anger. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty. A dog barked somewhere far away. The moon hung low and yellow over the rooftops. Brian Calloway was dead. The guy who made Jake's life hell for 4 years straight. The guy who pushed him into lockers, called him names, tripped him in the cafeteria, spread rumors, made everyone laugh at him. The guy who once shoved Jake's face into a toilet in the boys' bathroom while 5 other guys stood around and watched. Brian Calloway. And now he was gone. Jake should have felt relief. Maybe even satisfaction, but he didn't. He felt something else, something hollow and cold. He turned away from the window and went to his closet. He pulled out his leather jacket, the one with the worn elbows and the faded patches on the back. He hadn't worn it in months. It still smelled like gasoline and road dust. He didn't know why he was doing this. But 30 minutes later, Jake was on his motorcycle, engine rumbling low and deep, heading out of the city. Millbrook was 300 miles away. The road was dark and empty. Jake's headlight cut through the night like a knife. The wind was cold against his face, even with the helmet on. He liked it that way. It kept him awake, kept him from thinking too much. But he couldn't stop thinking about Brian, not the Brian from high school, Not the Brian who made him feel small and worthless, but the Brian from the phone call. The Brian who died alone in his kitchen at 33. What kind of life had Brian lived after high school? Did he ever think about Jake? Did he ever feel bad about what he did? Or did he forget about Jake the second graduation ended? Jake didn't know, and he hated that he cared. He stopped at a gas station around 4 in the morning. The place was lit up like a little island in the middle of nowhere. One pump, one clerk inside reading a magazine. Jake filled up the tank and went inside to pay. The clerk looked up. He was an older guy, maybe 60, with a gray beard and tired eyes. "Bit early for a ride," the clerk said. "Couldn't sleep," Jake replied. The clerk nodded like he understood. "Where you headed?" "Millbrook. That's a long way." "Yeah." The clerk rang him up. Jake paid in cash and started to leave, but the clerk said, "You okay, son?" Jake stopped. He looked back. "Why?" "You got that look," the clerk said, "like you're carrying something heavy." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and walked out. Back on the road, the sky started to lighten. The stars faded. The horizon turned pink, then orange, then gold. By the time Jake crossed into Millbrook County, the sun was up and the world looked almost beautiful. Almost. Millbrook hadn't changed much. Same main street, same gas station, same diner with the faded red sign, same park with the rusted swings. Jake hadn't been back here in 15 years. Not since the day he graduated and left without looking back. He pulled into a motel on the edge of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and a neon sign that only half worked. He paid for one night and got a key to room 7. The room smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. Jake tossed his bag on the bed and sat down. His legs ached from the ride. His back was stiff, but he didn't care. He pulled out his phone and searched for Brian Calloway's obituary. It didn't take long to find. Brian Michael Calloway, 33, of Millbrook, passed away unexpectedly on November 18th. He is survived by his son, Ethan, age 9. A memorial service will be held on Saturday, November 23rd at Millbrook Community Church at 2 p.m. Jake read it 3 times. Brian had a son, a 9-year-old boy. Jake put the phone down and stared at the wall. He didn't know why that detail hit him so hard, but it did. The funeral was at 2. Jake showed up at 1:45. He stood outside the church, helmet in hand, leather jacket zipped up. People were already inside. He could hear the organ playing, soft, sad. He didn't want to go in, but his feet carried him forward anyway. Inside, the church was packed, rows and rows of people dressed in black. At the front, there was a casket, closed, flowers everywhere. A big photo of Brian on a stand next to it. Jake stared at the photo. Brian looked older, heavier. His smile was the same, though, that cocky, confident smile. Jake felt sick. He sat in the very last row in the corner where no one could see him. He kept his head down. A few people glanced at him, probably wondering who the guy in the leather jacket was, but no one said anything. The service started. A pastor spoke. Then Brian's brother spoke. Then a friend. Everyone said nice things about how Brian was a good man, a hard worker, a loving father. Jake listened, and he didn't know what to feel. After the service, people started filing out to the cemetery behind the church. Jake stayed in his seat. He waited until almost everyone was gone. Then he stood up and followed. The cemetery was small, old gravestones covered in moss, a few trees scattered around. The crowd gathered around the grave. Jake stood far back behind a tree watching. He saw the boy, Ethan. He was small for 9, skinny, wearing a black suit that was too big for him. His hair was messy, his eyes were red. He stood next to an older woman, probably his grandmother, but he looked completely alone. Jake's chest tightened. The pastor said a prayer. They lowered the casket. People started throwing flowers on top, one by one. And then Ethan stepped forward. He held a single white flower in his hand. He stood at the edge of the grave, staring down. His lips were trembling. His whole body was shaking. He didn't throw the flower. He just stood there, frozen. The grandmother reached out to him, but he pulled away. He shook his head. He backed up. And then he turned and ran. He ran past the crowd, past the gravestones, past the trees, and disappeared around the side of the church. No one went after him. Everyone just stood there, whispering, looking uncomfortable. Jake didn't think. He just moved. He walked fast past the crowd, following the direction the boy went. He found him behind the church, sitting on the ground with his back against the wall, knees pulled up to his chest, face buried in his arms. He was crying, not quiet crying, loud, broken, desperate crying. Jake stopped a few feet away. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he should say anything. But then Ethan looked up. His face was streaked with tears. His eyes were wide and scared. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. His voice was small and shaky. Jake knelt down slowly so he was at the boy's level. "My name's Jake," he said softly. "I knew your dad." Ethan stared at him. "Were you his friend?" Jake hesitated, then he said, "It's complicated." Ethan wiped his nose with the back of his hand. He looked so small, so lost. "Everyone keeps saying he was a good dad," Ethan whispered. "But he wasn't." Jake's heart stopped. Ethan's voice cracked. "He yelled at me all the time. He said I wasn't good enough. He said I was weak. He said..." His voice broke completely and he started crying again. Jake didn't move. He just watched this little boy fall apart in front of him. And suddenly everything made sense. Brian hadn't changed. He was still a bully, but this time the victim was his own son. Jake felt something shift inside him, something heavy and painful and old. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white flower. He'd picked it up outside the church without really thinking about it. He held it out to Ethan. "Your dad hurt a lot of people," Jake said quietly, "including me. But you know what I learned?" Ethan looked up at him, eyes full of tears. Hurt people," Jake said. "And the only way to stop it is to let it go." Ethan stared at the flower. "I came here to forgive your dad," Jake said. "Not because he deserves it, but because I deserve to be free." Ethan's lip trembled. He took the flower and then he whispered, "I don't know how to let it go." Jake's throat tightened. "Me neither, kid," he said. "But maybe we can figure it out together." Ethan looked at him, really looked at him. And then, without warning, he lunged forward and wrapped his arms around Jake's neck. He held on tight. And Jake, for the first time in 15 years, let himself cry. If this story is hitting you in the chest, please hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me what you're feeling right now. And subscribe, because the next chapter is going to break you. Jake didn't know how long they stayed like that. Him and this boy he'd just met, kneeling in the dirt behind a church, holding on to each other like they were the only two people left in the world. When Ethan finally pulled back, his face was red and puffy. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve and looked down at the flower in his hand. The white petals were crushed a little from being squeezed so tight. "I should go back," Ethan whispered. "Grandma's gonna be mad." "You don't have to go back yet," Jake said gently. "You can stay here as long as you need." Ethan shook his head. "She's already mad at me. She said I embarrassed her by running away." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He took a slow breath. "You didn't embarrass anyone," he said. "You're 9 years old and your dad just died. You're allowed to feel however you feel." Ethan looked up at him with those big sad eyes. "You really knew my dad?" "Yeah, I did." Did Did he hurt you too? Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, buddy, he did. Ethan's voice got quieter. What did he do? Jake thought about lying, about softening it. But something in the boy's eyes stopped him. This kid had lived with Brian Calloway. He knew what kind of man his father was. He didn't need protection from the truth. He needed someone to tell him the truth. He made me feel small, Jake said. Every single day for 4 years. He told me I was nothing. He made other people laugh at me. He hurt me in ways that didn't leave bruises, but they still hurt. Real bad. Ethan nodded like he understood completely. Did you hate him? Ethan asked. Jake didn't answer right away. He looked out across the cemetery. The crowd was starting to break up. People were walking back to their cars. The grandmother was standing near the grave, looking around, probably searching for Ethan. For a long time, yeah, Jake said. I hated him. I thought about him almost every day. I imagined all the things I'd say to him if I ever saw him again. All the ways I'd make him understand what he did to me. And then? Ethan asked. And then I realized something, Jake said. Hating him was like drinking poison and waiting for him to die. It wasn't hurting him. It was only hurting me. Ethan looked down at the flower again. His little fingers traced the edge of a petal. I don't think I can forgive him, Ethan said. His voice was barely a whisper. You don't have to, Jake said. Not today, not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't something you force. It's something that happens when you're ready. And if you're never ready, that's okay too. Ethan's chin started to tremble again. He said I was the reason Mom left. Jake's heart broke. He said if I was stronger, if I was better, she wouldn't have gone away. He said it was my fault. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek. Jake wanted to find Brian Calloway's grave and scream at it. He wanted to dig him up and make him answer for every cruel word he ever said to this little boy. But Brian was gone, and all that was left was the damage. Listen to me, Jake said, his voice firm but gentle. Your mom leaving had nothing to do with you, you hear me? Nothing. Whatever happened between your mom and dad, that was their problem, not yours. You were just a kid, you are just a kid, and nothing that happened was your fault. Ethan looked at him like he wanted to believe it but didn't know how. My dad said, your dad was wrong, Jake said. And I know that's hard to hear. I know you loved him. I know part of you still does. But loving someone doesn't mean they were right. It doesn't mean they didn't hurt you. And it doesn't mean you have to carry the things they put on you. Ethan's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled over. I don't know what to do, he cried. Everyone keeps telling me I should be sad, but I'm not. I'm just mad. I'm so mad at him. And I feel bad for being mad because he's dead, and you're not supposed to be mad at dead people. Jake reached out and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. You can be mad, he said. You can be so mad. And you can be sad at the same time, and confused, and relieved, and guilty for feeling relieved. You can feel all of it, Ethan. There's no right way to feel when someone dies, especially someone who hurt you. Ethan wiped his face with both hands. He took a shaky breath. Did you come here to yell at him? Ethan asked. I thought about it, Jake admitted. I rode 300 miles thinking maybe I'd stand over his grave and tell him exactly what I thought of him. But when I got here, I realized I didn't need to do that. Why not? Because he's already gone, and yelling at a grave wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't take back what he did. It wouldn't make me feel better. The only thing that would make me feel better yet was letting it go. Ethan looked at the flower in his hand. Then he looked up at Jake. Will you come with me? He asked. To the grave? Jake nodded. Yeah, buddy, I'll come with you. They walked back together. Slowly. The crowd had thinned out. Only a few people were left, standing around talking quietly. The grandmother saw them coming and her face went hard. She marched over, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Ethan Michael Calloway, where have you been?" she snapped. "Do you have any idea how worried I was? You can't just run off like that. This is your father's funeral. You need to show some respect." Ethan shrank back, but Jake stepped forward slightly, putting himself between the boy and the woman. "Ma'am," Jake said calmly, "he just needed a minute." The grandmother looked Jake up and down. Her eyes landed on his leather jacket, his boots, the tattoos on his hands. "And who are you?" she asked coldly. "I'm Jake. I knew Brian. I've never seen you before. We went to high school together." Her expression didn't soften. "Well, thank you for bringing him back, but I'll take it from here." She reached for Ethan's arm, but Ethan pulled away. "Grandma, stop," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" "I said stop." His voice was louder now, shakier but louder. The grandmother's eyes went wide. "Ethan!" "I'm not going home with you," Ethan said. "Not yet. I need to do something first." "Ethan, we are leaving. Now." "No." The word hung in the air. Jake could see the panic rising in the grandmother's face, the anger, the control slipping away. "You will not speak to me like that," she said. "Your father would be ashamed of you right now." And that's when Jake stepped in. "Ma'am, with all due respect," he said, his voice low and steady. "Brian doesn't get to be ashamed of anyone, not anymore." The grandmother's mouth fell open. "Excuse me? How dare you?" "I'm not trying to disrespect you," Jake said, "but this boy just lost his father and he's trying to process it the only way he knows how. So maybe, just for today, you could let him do that." The grandmother stared at him. Her face was red. Her hands were clenched into fists. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, her voice shaking, "but you have no right to tell me how to raise my grandson." "You're right," Jake said, "I don't. But I do know what it's like to be a scared kid who needs someone to listen. And right now he needs that more than he needs a lecture." The grandmother opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She looked at Ethan, then at Jake, then back at Ethan. Finally, she said, "Fine, you have 5 minutes. Then we're leaving." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking hard against the ground. Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding. "Thank you," he whispered. Jake nodded. "Come on, let's finish this." They walked to the grave together. The casket was already covered with dirt. The flowers were piled on top. It looked so final, so permanent. Ethan stood at the edge, staring down. He still held the white flower in his hand. Jake stood next to him, quiet, waiting. After a long moment, Ethan spoke. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jake said. "But if you want to, you can. He can't hear you, but maybe you need to hear it." Ethan nodded slowly. He took a deep, shaky breath. And then he started talking. "Dad," he said, his voice small and broken, "I wish you were different. I wish you were the kind of dad who hugged me, who told me I was good enough, who didn't make me feel like I was always doing something wrong." His voice cracked. "I wish I could say I'm gonna miss you. But I don't know if I will. And that makes me feel really bad. Because I think I'm supposed to miss you, but mostly I just feel scared. Because now I don't know what's gonna happen to me, and I'm mad. I'm so mad at you for leaving. For dying before I could tell you how much you hurt me." Tears were streaming down his face now. "But Jake says I have to let it go. So I'm gonna try. I don't know if I can, but I'm gonna try." He knelt down and placed the white flower on top of the grave. And then he stood up, wiped his face, and looked at Jake. "Can we go now?" he asked. "Yeah," Jake said, "we can go." They started walking back toward the church. But before they got there, a voice called out, "Jake?" Jake turned. A man was walking toward them, tall, broad shoulders, wearing a black suit. It took Jake a second to recognize him. Tommy Reeves. "Jake, man, I can't believe you actually came," Tommy said. He looked older, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same. "Yeah," Jake said, "I came." Tommy looked at Ethan, then back at Jake. "Is this Brian's son?" Jake said. "Ethan." Tommy's face softened. "Hey, buddy, I'm sorry about your dad." Ethan didn't say anything. He just nodded. Tommy looked at Jake again. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Jake glanced at Ethan. "You okay if I step away for a minute?" Ethan nodded. "I'll wait over there." He pointed to a bench near the church. "Okay, I'll be right there." Ethan walked away and Tommy pulled Jake aside. "Man, I didn't think you'd actually come," Tommy said again. "I thought you'd tell me to go to hell." "I almost did," Jake admitted. Tommy shook his head. "I know Brian did some messed up stuff to you back in the day. We all knew. And I'm sorry, man. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you." Jake looked at him. "Why didn't you?" Tommy's smile faded. "Because I was scared. Brian was... he was intense, you know. And I didn't want him to turn on me, so I just stayed quiet. And I've felt like crap about it ever since." Jake didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry, Jake," Tommy said. "Really, I'm sorry." Jake nodded slowly. "Thanks." Tommy glanced over at Ethan. "That kid's been through hell. His mom took off when he was 5. Brian was, well, let's just say he wasn't father of the year. And now the kid's stuck with his grandma, who's even worse." Jake's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" Tommy lowered his voice. "She's controlling, cold. Treats him like he's a problem to be managed. I've seen her snap at him in public more than once. The kid doesn't stand a chance with her." Jake looked over at Ethan. The boy was sitting on the bench, swinging his legs, staring at the ground. "Someone needs to step in," Jake said. "Yeah," Tommy agreed. "But who? The family's a mess. There's no one else." Jake didn't say anything, but something inside him was already shifting. Ethan's grandmother came back exactly 5 minutes later. She grabbed Ethan by the arm and started pulling him toward the parking lot. "Say goodbye," she said curtly. Ethan looked back at Jake. His eyes were pleading. "Wait," Jake called out. The grandmother stopped and turned. "What?" Jake walked over. He knelt down in front of Ethan and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're gonna be okay," Jake said. "You hear me? You're gonna be okay." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "How do you know?" "Because you're stronger than you think," Jake said. "And because you're not alone. Not anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He scribbled his phone number on it and handed it to Ethan. "If you ever need to talk," Jake said, "you call me, anytime, day or night. I don't care, you call me." Ethan took the paper and clutched it like it was the most important thing in the world. "Promise?" he whispered. "Promise," Jake said. The grandmother yanked Ethan away. "We're leaving." Ethan looked back one more time as they walked toward the car, and Jake stood there watching them go. Tommy came up beside him. "You gonna be okay?" Tommy asked. Jake didn't answer, because he wasn't sure. All he knew was that something had changed, something big, and he couldn't just walk away. Not this time. That night, Jake sat in his motel room staring at his phone. He thought about Ethan, about the way the kid had looked at him, about the way he'd held on to him like Jake was the only person in the world who understood. He thought about Brian, about all the years he'd spent hating him, about how that hate had shaped him, changed him, made him into someone he didn't always recognize. and he thought about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness people talk about in church. Not the kind that erases the past or makes everything okay. But the kind that sets you free, the kind that says what you did to me was wrong, but I'm not going to let it define me anymore. Jake picked up his phone. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't leave Ethan behind. Not like this. He opened his messages and started typing. "Tommy, I need to know something. What happens to Ethan now?" The response came 2 minutes later. "He goes to live with his grandma. Full custody, why?" Jake stared at the message, and then he did something he never thought he'd do. He called a lawyer. If you're feeling this story in your soul right now, please hit that like button. Comment below and tell me, what would you do if you were Jake? And subscribe, because the next chapter is going to change everything. The lawyer's name was Maria Santos. She had an office in a small building downtown, right above a bakery. Jake could smell fresh bread when he walked up the stairs. It was 7 in the morning. He hadn't slept. Maria was younger than he expected, maybe 35, sharp eyes, a no-nonsense kind of face. She shook his hand firmly and gestured to a chair. "So," she said, sitting down behind her desk, "you want to fight for custody of a child you just met?" Jake nodded. Maria leaned back in her chair and studied him. "You understand how this sounds, right?" "Yeah," Jake said, "I know. Walk me through it," she said, "from the beginning." So Jake did. He told her about Brian, about high school, about the bullying, about the phone call in the middle of the night and the 300-mile ride, about showing up to the funeral, about finding Ethan behind the church broken and crying. He told her about the grandmother, about the way she grabbed Ethan, about the things Tommy had said, and he told her about the phone call, the one that came at midnight the night before. Jake had been lying in bed staring at the ceiling again when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick it up. "Hello? Jake?" It was a small voice, a scared voice. "Ethan?" "Yeah." The boy's voice was shaking. "I'm sorry, I know it's late, but you said I could call." Jake sat up fast. "It's okay, you can call me anytime. What's wrong?" There was a long pause. Jake could hear breathing on the other end. Heavy. Like Ethan was trying not to cry. "Grandma locked me in my room," Ethan whispered. Jake's blood went cold. "What?" "She said I was being disrespectful. She said I needed to learn discipline. She took my phone, but I hid this old one under my mattress. She doesn't know I have it." "Ethan, listen to me," Jake said, his voice steady but urgent. "Are you safe? Did she hurt you?" "No," Ethan said quickly. She locked the door from the outside and she said I'm not allowed to come out until morning, and I'm scared, Jake. I'm really scared. The room is so dark and I don't like being alone, and I keep thinking about Dad, and His voice broke completely. Jake was already on his feet, pulling on his jeans. "Where do you live?" Jake asked. "Give me the address." "I can't," Ethan said. "She'll be so mad. Ethan, I need you to trust me. Give me the address." There was another pause. Then Ethan rattled off an address. Jake wrote it down on his hand with a pen. "I'm coming to get you," Jake said. "You can't," Ethan said, panic rising in his voice. "She'll call the police. She'll say you're kidnapping me. I'm not going to take you," Jake said. "I promise, but I need to see that you're okay. I need to talk to your grandma." "She won't listen." "Maybe not," Jake said, "but I have to try." Jake had ridden to the address, a small house on the edge of town, dark, quiet. All the lights were off except for one on the front porch. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the porch light came on. The door opened a crack. The grandmother's face appeared. Her eyes went wide when she saw Jake. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I need to talk to you," Jake said calmly. "It's midnight. You need to leave before I call the police." "Call them," Jake said. "But I'm not leaving until I know Ethan's okay." Her face went red. "How dare you come to my house and—" "Did you lock him in his room?" Jake asked. She froze. "I'm sorry, what? Did you lock Ethan in his room?" Her mouth opened and closed. "That is none of your business." "He called me," Jake said, scared out of his mind. "So yeah, it is my business. You have no right—" "He's a child," Jake said, his voice rising now. "He just lost his father, and you locked him in a room in the dark. What is wrong with you?" The grandmother's hands were shaking. "I am trying to teach him discipline. Something his father failed to do. That boy is out of control. He needs structure. He needs love," Jake said. "He needs someone who actually cares about him, not someone who treats him like a problem to be solved." The grandmother's face twisted. "You don't know anything about raising children." "You're right," Jake said. "I don't. But I know what it's like to be hurt by someone who's supposed to protect you. And I'm not going to stand by and let it happen to him. Get off my property. Let me talk to him." "No." "Then I'm calling Child Protective Services." Her eyes went wide. "You wouldn't." Jake pulled out his phone. "Try me." They stood there, staring at each other. The night was cold and still. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. Finally, the grandmother stepped back. "5 minutes," she said, "and then you leave, and you never come back." She led him upstairs. She unlocked Ethan's door. The room was pitch black. Jake stepped inside. He could hear Ethan's breathing, fast, shallow. "Ethan," Jake said softly. "It's me, it's Jake." A small shape moved in the darkness. Ethan turned on a lamp next to his bed. His face was red and puffy from crying. His eyes were terrified. But when he saw Jake, he ran. He ran across the room and threw his arms around Jake's waist and held on like he was drowning. "You came," Ethan whispered. "You actually came." Jake knelt down and hugged him back. "I told you, anytime." The grandmother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face hard. Jake looked at Ethan. "Are you okay?" Ethan nodded, but Jake could feel him shaking. "You're safe now," Jake said. "I promise." The grandmother cleared her throat. "Your 5 minutes are up." Jake looked at her, then at Ethan, and he made a decision. "I'm getting him out of here," Jake said. Maria Santos listened to the whole story without interrupting. When Jake finished, she leaned forward and folded her hands on the desk. "Okay," she said. "Here's the reality. You have no legal relationship to this child. You're not family. You're not a legal guardian. You met him 2 days ago. No judge in the country is going to hand you custody." Jake's heart sank. "But," Maria continued, "that doesn't mean we can't try." Jake looked up. "What do you mean?" "We file for emergency custody based on the grandmother's behavior. Locking a child in a room could be considered neglect or emotional abuse. We document everything. The phone call, your visit, any witnesses. We build a case that Ethan is not safe in that home." "And then what?" Jake asked. "Then we go to court, we fight, and we hope the judge sees what you see. A child who needs help, and a man who's willing to give it." Jake swallowed hard. "What are my chances?" Maria didn't sugarcoat it. "Honestly, maybe 20%, maybe less. The system favors family, and you're a stranger with a motorcycle and tattoos and no experience raising kids. On paper, you look like the last person who should have custody. But I've been doing this for 10 years, Maria said, and I've learned that the right thing doesn't always look like what people expect." Sometimes the person who shows up is the person who's supposed to be there. So if you're serious about this, if you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you. Jake looked at her, and he nodded. I'm serious, he said. Good. Maria opened a folder. Then let's get to work. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Jake's life. He moved into the motel full-time. He called his boss back home and explained the situation. His boss told him to take all the time he needed. He met with Maria almost every day. They filed paperwork. They gathered evidence. They interviewed people who knew the grandmother. They documented everything. Tommy Reeves became an unexpected ally. He gave a statement about the grandmother's behavior, about the way she treated Ethan in public, about the way she spoke to him. Other people came forward too, neighbors, teachers. A school counselor who said Ethan had been struggling for years. And through it all, Jake stayed in touch with Ethan. They couldn't see each other. The grandmother had made that very clear. She'd filed a restraining order against Jake, claiming he was harassing her family. But Ethan still had the hidden phone, and every night he called. They talked about everything, about school, about cartoons, about video games, about nothing and everything. And slowly Ethan started to open up. He told Jake about the nights his dad came home drunk, about the yelling, about the nights he hid in his closet with his hands over his ears. He told Jake about his mom, how she used to sing to him, how she promised she'd come back, how she never did. He told Jake about the loneliness, the fear, the feeling that he was broken and no one would ever want him. And Jake listened. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to make it better. He just listened, and that was enough. The court date came faster than Jake expected. He put on the nicest clothes he owned, a button-up shirt, clean jeans. He left the leather jacket at the motel. Maria told him he needed to look approachable. The courtroom was small and cold. The grandmother sat on one side with her lawyer. Jake sat on the other side with Maria. Ethan wasn't there. The judge had decided it would be too stressful for him. The hearing lasted 2 hours. The grandmother's lawyer painted Jake as a dangerous stranger with no business interfering in a family matter. He brought up Jake's lack of experience, his lifestyle, the fact that he'd only known Ethan for a few weeks. Maria fought back hard. She presented the evidence of neglect. She called Tommy as a witness. She called the school counselor. She painted a picture of a child who was suffering and a grandmother who was unfit. And then the judge asked Jake to speak. Jake stood up. His hands were shaking, his mouth was dry. "Your Honor," he said, "I'm not gonna pretend I'm the perfect person for this. I'm not. I don't know anything about raising kids. I don't have a big house or a lot of money. I ride a motorcycle and I work with my hands, and I'm probably the last person anyone would pick to take care of a child." He paused. "But I know what it's like to be that kid. I know what it's like to feel like nobody sees you, like nobody cares. And I know what it would have meant to me if just one person had shown up and said, 'I see you, and you matter.'" His voice cracked. "Ethan matters. And he deserves someone who's gonna fight for him, someone who's gonna show up even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense. And I want to be that person, if you'll let me." The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Jake for a long time. Then she looked at the grandmother. Then at the papers in front of her. "I'm going to take a 15-minute recess," she said. "Then I'll make my ruling." Those 15 minutes felt like 15 years. Jake sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, his head in his hands. Maria sat next to him. "You did good in there," she said. Jake didn't respond. "Whatever happens," Maria said, "you showed up. That means something." "It won't mean anything if he has to go back to her," Jake said. Maria didn't argue. Finally, the bailiff called them back in. Jake's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. The judge sat down. She looked at Jake, then at the grandmother. "This is not an easy decision," she said. "But after reviewing the evidence and hearing testimony, I am granting temporary emergency custody to Mr. Jake Harmon." Jake's breath caught in his chest. The grandmother stood up. "Your Honor, you can't." "Sit down," the judge said firmly. "This is a temporary order. Mr. Harmon will have custody for 90 days, during which time a social worker will conduct home visits and evaluations. At the end of that period, we will reconvene and determine permanent custody arrangements. But for now, I believe it is in the child's best interest to be removed from your home, ma'am." The grandmother's face went white. The judge looked at Jake. "Mr. Harmon, do you understand the responsibility you're taking on?" Jake nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Then we're adjourned." The gavel came down, and just like that, everything changed. An hour later, Jake was standing outside the grandmother's house with a social worker named Lisa. They knocked on the door. The grandmother answered. Her eyes were red. Her face was tight with rage. "He's upstairs," she said coldly. "Packing." Lisa went inside. Jake waited on the porch. 5 minutes later, Ethan came down the stairs. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder and a small duffel bag in his hand. His eyes were wide and uncertain. He saw Jake standing on the porch, and he stopped. "Is it real?" Ethan whispered. "Am I really leaving?" Jake nodded. "Yeah, buddy, you're really leaving." Ethan's face crumpled, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was relief. He dropped his bags and ran. He ran straight into Jake's arms and held on tight. "I thought you weren't gonna come," Ethan sobbed. "I thought you were gonna leave like everyone else." Jake held him close. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not anymore." The social worker smiled. "Ready to go?" Ethan pulled back and looked up at Jake. "Where are we going?" Jake smiled. "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Together." Ethan picked up his bags. He looked back at the house one more time. The grandmother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face stone cold. Ethan didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked to Jake's motorcycle. "You ever ridden on one of these?" Jake asked. Ethan shook his head. "Well," Jake said, pulling out a helmet. "First time for everything." He helped Ethan onto the back of the bike. He made sure the helmet was strapped tight. He threw the bags into the saddlebags, and then he climbed on. "Hold on tight," Jake said. Ethan wrapped his arms around Jake's waist. Jake started the engine. The rumble was deep and steady, and then they rode. Away from the house, away from the pain, away from the past. The sun was setting, the sky was orange and pink and gold. The wind was cool against their faces. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt something they'd almost forgotten. Hope. They didn't go far that first night, just to the motel. Jake got a room with 2 beds. They ordered pizza. They sat on the floor and ate it straight from the box. Ethan didn't talk much at first. He just ate and looked around the room like he couldn't believe it was real. Finally, he said, "What happens now?" Jake wiped his hands on a napkin. "Well, we've got 90 days. In that time, I have to prove I can take care of you. We'll have a social worker checking in on us, making sure you're safe, making sure you're happy. And at the end of 90 days, we go back to court, and the judge decides if you stay with me or if you go back to your grandma." Ethan's face went pale. "What if she says I have to go back?" "Then we fight," Jake said, "as hard as we can. But I'm not gonna lie to you, buddy. I don't know what's gonna happen. All I know is that I'm gonna do everything I can to keep you safe." Ethan nodded slowly. Then he said, "Why are you doing this?" Jake looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You don't even know me," Ethan said. "You just met me. Why do you care?" Jake took a deep breath. Because nobody showed up for me when I needed them. And I spent a lot of years angry about that, hurt by it. And I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want you to grow up thinking nobody cares, because I do care. And I'm gonna keep showing up, even when it's hard. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. What if I mess up? What if I'm too much trouble? Then we'll figure it out, Jake said. Together. That's what family does. Ethan stared at him. Are we family now? Jake smiled. Yeah, buddy, I think we are. Ethan started crying again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the desperate, broken crying from before. It was softer, quieter, like something inside him was finally letting go. Jake reached over and pulled him into a hug, and they sat there on the floor of that cheap motel room. Surrounded by pizza boxes and soda cans, holding on to each other like they were the only thing keeping each other from falling apart. Because maybe they were. 3 months later, they went back to court. Jake had gotten an apartment, 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but it was clean and safe. Ethan had his own room, his own bed, his own space. They'd fallen into a routine, breakfast together, school drop-off. Jake worked during the day, picked Ethan up in the afternoon, homework, dinner, movies, bedtime. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days, days when Ethan woke up from nightmares, days when he shut down and didn't want to talk, days when Jake didn't know what to do and felt like he was failing. But they kept showing up for each other. The social worker visited every 2 weeks. She watched them together. She talked to Ethan alone. She asked questions, she took notes, and at the end of 90 days, she filed her report. The courtroom was packed this time. Maria sat next to Jake. Tommy was there, the social worker, even a few teachers from Ethan's school. The grandmother sat on the other side with her lawyer. She looked older, tired. The judge walked in. Everyone stood, then sat. I've reviewed the social worker's report, the judge said. I've read the statements from teachers, neighbors, and family friends, and I've considered everything that's been presented to me over the last 3 months. Jake's heart was pounding. Mr. Harmon, the judge said, stand up, please. Jake stood. His legs felt weak. In all my years on the bench, the judge said, I've seen a lot of people come through here asking for custody. Most of them are family. Most of them have experience. Most of them fit the profile of what we expect a guardian to look like. She paused. You don't fit that profile, Mr. Harmon. Not even close. Jake's stomach dropped. But what you do have, the judge continued, is something far more important. You have heart, you have commitment, and you have shown beyond any doubt that you are willing to do whatever it takes to give this child a safe and loving home. She looked down at her papers. Therefore, I am granting you full legal custody of Ethan Calloway, effective immediately. The room erupted. Tommy jumped up and cheered. Maria grabbed Jake's arm and squeezed it. The social worker was smiling. Even some of the teachers were clapping. Jake couldn't breathe. The judge banged her gavel. Order! Order! The room quieted. Ethan, the judge said, would you come up here, please? A door at the side of the courtroom opened, and Ethan walked in. He was wearing a button-up shirt that was a little too big. His hair was combed. His eyes were nervous. But when he saw Jake, he smiled. The judge smiled too. Ethan, do you understand what just happened? Ethan nodded. I think so. You're going to stay with Mr. Harmon permanently. Is that okay with you? Ethan looked at Jake, and Jake looked back at him. Yeah, Ethan said softly, and that's okay with me. The judge nodded. Then it settled. Congratulations to you both. She banged the gavel one more time, and just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, Jake and Ethan stood on the steps. The sun was shining, the air was warm. People walked past, going about their lives, not knowing that two broken people had just been made whole. Ethan looked up at Jake. "So what happens now?" Jake smiled. "Now, we go home." "Home," Ethan repeated, like he was testing the word, like he was trying to believe it was real. "Yeah," Jake said, "home." Ethan took Jake's hand, and together they walked down the steps. At the bottom, Jake's motorcycle was parked on the street. Ethan climbed on the back without hesitation now. He didn't need help anymore. He knew where to put his feet. He knew how to hold on. Jake started the engine, and as they rode away, Ethan leaned his head against Jake's back and closed his eyes. For the first time in his entire life, he felt safe. And Jake, for the first time in 15 years, felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Peace. 2 years later, they went back to Millbrook one more time. Not for a funeral, not for a fight, just to visit. They stood in the cemetery, side by side, looking down at Brian Calloway's grave. The flowers were gone now. The dirt had settled. Grass had started to grow over it. Ethan knelt down and placed a single white flower on the grave. He didn't cry. He didn't say anything. He just stood up, took Jake's hand, and walked away. And as they walked back to the motorcycle, Ethan said something that made Jake stop in his tracks. "Thank you." Jake looked down at him. "For what?" Ethan smiled. "For showing up." Jake's throat tightened. He pulled Ethan into a hug. "Always," Jake said, "I'll always show up." They climbed onto the motorcycle. The engine roared to life. And as they rode off into the sunset, Ethan wrapped his arms around Jake and held on tight. Not because he was scared, but because he knew no matter what, he wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Jake. The end. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something, please hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me what this meant to you, and subscribe because we're telling more stories like this. Stories about real people, real pain, and real hope. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the person who shows up isn't the person you expect. Sometimes it's the person who needed saving just as much as you did.